Welcome, everybody. Happy to be here with all of you. And my name is Leah Obias. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the Director of Policy and Strategy at Race Forward. It's truly an honor to host and moderate this conversation today. Happy you could all join us. Welcome to our Facebook Live audience as well, those who are joining us from Facebook Live. If you're just tuning in, this is Race and Labor Rights. Again, my name is Leah Obias. Happy to be here with you all today. Next slide, Hiba. We want to just take a few minutes to pause, give folks the space to breathe, to grieve, and to reflect as needed. We want to remember the lives lost to gun and white supremacist vigilante violence. And our hearts are with the families who are burying loved ones today. So we just want to pause for a few moments. Thank you, everybody. Next slide, please, Hiba. As always, before we start our discussion today, first and foremost, we must acknowledge that this gathering, though virtual, is taking place on top of another struggle for liberation, that of the indigenous people of this land. So as a practice, we encourage folks to learn more about the original stewards of the land that you are on. I saw folks putting in the chat the lands that they are occupying. If you haven't done so yet, or you're not familiar with the website, please take a moment to look up your location using nativelands.ca or text the number here on the slide, and then in the chat, if you haven't done so yet, please let us know where you're joining us from, the territory that you are in. I am joining from Lenape-Hoking, which is the land of the Lenape people, Lenape and Canarsie, which is colonially known as Brooklyn. And the Lenape people are continuing to fight for resilience and sovereignty. And I want to encourage everyone who's chiming in from New York to learn more about the Lenape people. They have been a matrilineal society have been connected to the lands and the waterways around Manhattan and the 5 boroughs in New York City. Historically, the Lenape were the land that is now Foley Square and Union Square, where our movements gather for protest and mobilization, were also important gathering places for the Lenape. That's something that I always remember and try to remember when visiting those places. They're also, particularly Foley Square, the site of detention centers. But a lot of what New York is built upon was built originally by the Lenape in terms of the roads and the infrastructure, including Broadway, which extended all the way up into upstate New York. And in Brooklyn, Flatbush Avenue as well was a main road used by the Lenape. Next slide, please. So just to quote Joy Harjo, who is an Indigenous poet, "We're still America. We know the rumors of our demise. We spit them out and they die soon. Next slide, please. Race Forward. We are the host of this webinar series, Race and. We work to transform institutions. We partner with communities and community organizations to move policy, culture, and narrative for racial justice. We are home to Mass Freedom, which is a program to end prison, which is a prison abolition program, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, and our biennial Facing Race Conference happening this year that we hope to see you all at. We're also home to Colorlines, the online news site. So we are in the Race and webinar series. This is a series that puts race at the forefront of our conversations, and talks about race explicitly, but not exclusively. We're here to talk about intersections of racial justice and other movements. And we build solidarity across movements and deepen strategy to address intersecting oppressions. So just a few logistical notes. Everyone on Zoom is currently on mute and off camera, but you can message panelists in case you're having technical difficulties, and our tech lead, Hiba, will help you. You can send your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Our staff will help sort through the questions and group them together. We'll answer as many as possible during the Q&A section. As you can see, we also have ASL interpreters, live captioning support with us today to help make our webinar accessible today. So we want to acknowledge and thank Joy, Shamika, and Kafi, who are here providing interpretation. And of course, thank you to the webinar team, the planning team, the whole comms team, who have made this discussion a reality. So we're so excited to host this conversation today because we've seen a surge in labor organizing. You may have seen in the past few years a rise in strikes, in union efforts. The National Labor Relations Board reported last April that it has seen a 57% increase in the number of union representation petitions filed for the first half of the 2022 fiscal year. That would be from October to March. Starbucks workers across the country have voted to unionize over the past few months. New York app-based delivery drivers are forming a labor coalition, and Apple Store employees in Atlanta just demanded a union for the first time. At the same time, charges of unfair labor practices have risen by 14%. And workers today are organizing and petitioning for more union elections than at any point in the last 10 years. A recent poll shows that at 68%, labor unions in the United States have the highest approval rating since 1965. So people are supportive of the workers organizing and are taking notice. So this surge in labor organizing, it's clear that it's happening, and it's clear why. The pandemic has revealed some of the brutal contradictions of racial capitalism. And CNN recently reported that a new billionaire was minted about every 30 hours on average so far during the pandemic. A new billionaire every 30 hours. Meanwhile, Black, Indigenous, and other workers of color have been particularly hit hard. BIPOC workers are overrepresented in jobs with high exposure rates, like those in retail and service industries. We have insufficient benefits, limited labor protections, or bargaining power. And structural racism already created dangerous working conditions for workers of color before the pandemic. And the pandemic only made conditions more dangerous and more precarious. So what are workers doing about it? Well, the organizers joining us today represent experience spanning almost 7 decades of organizing to transform working conditions for tens of thousands of workers. No exaggeration, probably many more thousands than that. They've organized in different sectors, in conditions, but the main thread is building worker power for dignity, rights, and an economy that respects workers and respects our labor. So it's an honor to host the conversation today, and I'm excited to get started. I'll invite the speakers to do a brief introduction before we get into the conversation, and I'll invite our first speaker, Dolores Huerta, to introduce herself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name is Dolores Huerta, and I am the president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation for Grassroots Community Organizing. In my previous life, I was the co-founder with Cesar Chavez of the United Farmworkers of America. And so I have been involved in labor organizing, I guess, for many, many years of my life. And very happy to be here with all of you today. I am currently in San Clemente, which is in San Diego County. And this is the home of the Chumash Native Americans and the San Gabrielenos, okay? So they had very much parts of the Southern California here today. And my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Hey, everybody. My name is Chris Smalls, former Amazon employee, founder of TCOEW, the Congress of Essential Workers, and now the interim president of the Amazon Labor Union. We successfully won our election on April 1st, 2022, which made it the first Amazon labor union in American history in 28 years. So right now we are currently fighting for a contract as well as fighting for recognition. I'm happy to share this space with you all. We want everybody to continue to support the Amazon Labor Union as we continue to get recognized and also fight for a contract. We all know that it's going to take a collective action, community, workers, political support, combining all these different movements. That's what it's about. We all have to be David versus Goliath, and we are all happy. Once again, the workers are happy to, once again, resurge the labor movement for the future generation. So happy to share this space with you all and looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. I'm Erica Clemmons Dean. I'm the Program and Advocacy Director for Family Values at Work. We are a network of labor unions and nonprofits that cover about 27 states currently. And we're working on economic justice issues, primarily leading the way in paid leave, paid sick days. So super excited to be here with you all and talk a bit more about that.
Wonderful to see everybody. So we're going to start the conversation with Dolores. Dolores, you are the founder and president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation for Community Organizing. And yes, and throughout your life, you've been a civil rights activist, a feminist, and an organizer. You're perhaps most well known for your role in organizing farm workers in the 60s and helping to lead the historic Delano grape strike and boycott, which was the result of your organization, the National Farm Workers Association, and the Filipino Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee coming together. So can you set the stage for us historically? What was the larger immigration context of the Delano grape strike and boycott, and why were low-wage farm workers, immigrant farm workers brought in from the Philippines and Mexico, and what were the working conditions?
Well, the working conditions were pretty miserable. When we started organizing the farm workers, their wages were like 70 cents an hour. They didn't have bathrooms in the fields. They didn't have cold drinking water. And when I talk about the toilets, that was a very, very big issue because you had a lot of women. About 50% of the labor force in the fields are women, and yet there were no places for them to, do their business. And so women had to, get people that could come around them with towels and sheets kind of to hide them. So it was a very, very big embarrassment for women to have to go through that. There was no workers' compensation for workers if they got injured on the job. Too bad. And there had been many, many strikes in the fields before we started organizing the workers, and were able to change those conditions. They had to work, of course, from sunup to sundown. There was no limit on the work day for them. And every time that workers would try to go on strike, they would bring in strike breakers, immigrant strike breakers, again, from the Philippines or from Mexico or places like that. So it's very, very hard for the workers to form a union. And so the history, and many workers were killed during those organizing attempts that workers had. Of course, that also happened to us when we were organizing. We had 3 of our members that were killed in our organizing. I'm sorry, I should mention 5 organizers that were killed actually during our organizing time. And of course, the use of immigrant workers has always been, you might say, the foundation of the agricultural industry from the time that they were able to take the lands for Mexico, which of course is California, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. They brought people in from Mexico at the very, very beginning to be able to farm the lands that they had taken from Mexico at that time. So, the whole thing about labor is that the way that workers are treated as workers, it kind of stems from slavery, because we know that the indigenous people that we all gave tribute to today, and the people from Africa that were brought in as slaves, and again, the immigrants that were brought in, they're the kind of ones, the people that built the infrastructure of the United States. And that was especially important for agriculture. But the whole idea that workers are supposed to use their life, the life force and their life energy to make other people rich. This is a foundation of slavery, and that has translated to workers also. The workers are supposed to make other people rich, and unfortunately, we still have that system that still exists in the United States. And the only thing that made a difference was labor unions, when workers were able to get together and form their own organization and to be able to fight for their rights. And of course, over the years, it's been very difficult. Back in the 30s, when you had the first resurgence of labor organizing, laborers had a lot of tools to help them. They had secondary boycotts, like the ones that the farm workers used. When we said to people, not only did we say don't buy grapes at a particular store, but we said don't shop at the store, boycott the store. That is what is called a secondary boycott. So the farmer, because we were able to use a secondary boycott because we were not covered by the National Labor Relations Law. And as you said earlier, that the racialization of workers and labor unions, well, farm workers were left out of the law when it was passed back in the 1930s because the farm workers were Black and brown. And very specifically, this is why they left out of that law. So from 1935, when the National Labor Relations Law was passed, the farm workers were excluded, as were domestic workers that were also excluded. And I think some public workers were also excluded at that time. So that meant that workers were not protected by overtime pay or the Fair Labor Standards Act. They were totally excluded. Now, the fact that we were excluded actually helped us organize, as I said before, because we could say to people, don't buy at the store that is selling grapes. And that is what is called a secondary boycott. But at the initial organizing stages of labor unions, all unions could do secondary boycotts. They could do sympathy strikes. That meant if you had one company that had the union and the other company didn't, that the first company could get, the workers could go on strike to support the other union. And but a lot of the economic tools that labor had, like sympathy strikes and secondary boycotts, were taken away in 1952 by the Taft-Hartley Act. So if we look at the history, that there have always been laws that have been aimed at labor unions. And even now today, where labor unions that are organizing, and this applies also to the Farmworkers Union, although the Farmworkers now has contracts with workers. But even today, the employers will do everything that they can to keep them from being recognized, as Mr. Small said, or by signing that contract. And there's one example I can give you. There's one company that I organized. It had close to 2,000 workers. And 20 years ago, I organized that company, and they still don't have a contract with the union because they have gone to court. They have done everything that they can fight, put all of the money that they used to hire these anti-union labor attorneys and consultants, they could use that money and give it to the workers so they could have better wages, better benefits, better medical plan, a pension, et cetera. But no, they prefer to use that money with these anti-labor consultants to keep the union from ever getting a contract. So when we think of, when we say to people and explain to them why they have to support labor, if we can think that the majority of the people in our country are working people. So who needs representation more, the employer or the worker? The employers always have a lot of money. They have all of their organizations that they pay fees to and dues to keep their organizations strong, but they continue to fight to keep the working people from having representation on the job, in the community, in the state legislature, and in the Congress. That is why workers need an organization. And unfortunately, a lot of people in our society do not understand what a labor union is. You have the corporate world refers to them as special interests. These are not special interests. These are working people. And who needs representation more? The employers who are rich and have a lot of assets, a lot of wealth, or the working person who is just trying to make a living day by day by the jobs that they have?
Thank you so much. Such powerful response and information. And since you mentioned building the organization and the need for the organization, the need for workers to have organization, I've heard you talk about the strike and the boycott as sort of a flashpoint in history, but that it took years of painstaking organizing and really building with the workers to get there. So could you give the audience an idea of what that's like, the day-to-day organizing tactics that you use to organize the farm workers?
That is so important because many times if people saw the movie about Cesar Chavez, they thought, well, Cesar walked into the field and all the workers went on strike. It didn't happen that way. Luckily, Cesar and I had learned how to organize from a great organizer named Fred Ross Sr. And we both belonged to a previous organization. It was a community organization called the Community Service Organization. And Mr. Ross taught us how to do house meetings. And that is that you meet with people in their homes. Their living room is actually the platform where you have the discussion about why it's important for them to change their lives. But the one thing that we have to make them understand is that nobody is going to do this for them, that they are the ones that have to commit. They have to commit that they're going to do the work to be able to change their situation. Nobody's going to come in on a white horse and save them. And so for 3 years, prior to the Delano grape strike in 1965, Cesar and I had house meetings with workers all over the Central Valley of California. And we had not intended to go on strike for another 2 years because we wanted to get all of the employers together to negotiate as a group instead of having to do it one by one. But the Filipino workers went on strike earlier, led by Larry Itliong, who was a person that I happened to organize, before we started the United Farm Workers. And so anyway, that strike lasted for 5 years. But the main thing is that we have to, organizing people to get them to commit, to make them understand that they have the power, but that they have to come together and they have to take direct action. So this is why we took that painstaking effort of having these meetings with workers for 3 solid years before the Delano grape strike. And then, of course, with the strike, it was impossible for us to win the strike because we were so close to the Mexican border that they could bring in strike breakers overnight. So eventually someone, an attorney from San Francisco, and he said to us, why don't you try a boycott? And of course, this is what, right after they were doing the Montgomery boycott, the bus boycott. And so then we said, okay, we'll try the boycott, and it worked. And a lot of the companies, they were owned by different liquor companies like Shenley, Gallo, people like that. And so we started boycotting the wine companies, and that worked really well. We got contracts really fast. But then when we went after the grape growers, which are, big companies, that was a little harder. But actually, once we started the boycott, it only took us 2 years to be able to get those contracts. But 17 million Americans stopped buying grapes. But the one thing, as I mentioned before, that really helped us is when we said to people, yeah, we don't want you to eat grapes, but we don't want you to shop at the stores that are selling grapes. Like in New York City, we started out with a small independents. We got them to take off the grapes. Then we went after the middle-sized chains like Wall Bombs. And then we worked our way up to the big ones like A&P, and so eventually we were able to get those stores to take all the grapes off, and that's how we won.
Wow, amazing. Yes, 17 million, just astonishing. Chris, I want to bring you into the conversation. You're organizing in a completely different industry in Amazon, but what Dolores was mentioning about, the rich, they don't need, the owners of these companies, the heads of these companies, they don't need representation. It's the workers that need the representation. And that's so true for Amazon. In the pandemic, I recently found this statistic, between March 18, 2020 and May 4, 2022, Jeff Bezos saw his wealth rise from 113 billion to 150 billion. I sort of see some of those numbers vary a little bit, but it's hard to wrap your head around. Meanwhile, Amazon workers who actually created that wealth, or the ones that actually make the company work, have faced long hours, low wages, dangerous conditions. So you're representing, or you work for a union that organized about 8,000 workers, correct me if I'm wrong, a little more than that, yeah, 8,000, over 8,000 workers. And it's been lauded as a grassroots effort. You had no backing from formal unions. And so I've heard you talk about the need to organize from the inside out and not the other way around, and really put the workers in the driver's seat of the union. So can you talk about Amazon workers, their demographics, who are they, the conditions that led you and your coworkers to organize a union? And if you could also share, like Dolores did, some of the tactics that you used to talk to the workers and organize them.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Dolores, too. Good to see you again. Yes, she's spot on. Just listening to her struggle and her journey, it's all making sense to what we're dealing with now. It's still going on, even decades later. These same type of tactics that these corporations use to stall out contracts and to stall out unions to make them go bankrupt so that workers give up in fighting. That's exactly what they're trying to do to us right now. So just to rewind back to the beginning, I'll even start before 2015 when I was hired. Amazon's been around for 28 years. I think it's about 28 years now. And in 28 years, this company has never been unionized by any established union. There's been several attempts, not just the ones that are recent, not just the Amazon Labor Union, the RWDSU in down Alabama. Even before that, there's been several attempts to unionize Amazon in the past. Just like Walmart or any other major retailer, there's been attempts by these established unions. And of course, with these trillion-dollar corporations, the million-dollar lawyers that they hire, the billion-dollar CEOs that created a system that pretty much hires and fires the working class people, these established unions were unsuccessful in trying to unionize a corporation like Amazon. So fast forward to the pandemic, when I walked out in 2020, it was a life or death situation. Amazon failed to provide its workers with PPE in the beginning of the pandemic, especially here in New York, when New York was the epicenter of the entire world. People at that time were dying every 15 minutes, and we were deemed as essential workers. And I say deemed as essential workers because we didn't ask for that. That's something that, once again, the company decided that the company and the government decided that the working class are essential workers now. We're the lifeline to pretty much society. You know, at the time, everything was closed down. Only thing that was really moving was transportation, packages, and nurses and doctors. And when you think about that category alone, how do Amazon workers end up in the same conversation, let alone the same sentence as a nurse and a doctor, when we don't have any of those credentials? And I can tell you now, I don't even know how to do CPR if you ask me. So to end up in that same category as an essential worker and say we're the closest thing to the Red Cross in the middle of a pandemic, when our job description literally says to have a GED or high school diploma and lift 50 pounds, it just wasn't what I signed up for when I applied for the job. And not only that, being a supervisor for 4.5 years, opening up 3 buildings in the tri-state area in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, training thousands of Amazon's employees, being what I consider an extended family to these workers who I spent 40 to 60 hours a week with, more than I spend with my own family, my own kids. There was no way that I couldn't say anything. As a supervisor, I always felt that's my responsibility in the building. If I saw a worker outside of the building that may have caught a flat tire, I'm the type I'm going to pull over and help them as well. It's not about just being a supervisor in the building. Yeah, you're responsible for these people. I feel like at all times, you know, you're representing them. You're listening to them every day. You're talking to them every day. There was no way I was going to say I'm going to be able to go home and be complacent about what's going on inside the warehouses. So I decided to take further action. It cost me my job, but I let a walkout over the working conditions, especially over COVID-19. After that, Jeff Bezos himself, a week later, decided to have a meeting about me, the worker that's at the bottom, that's making less than $40,000 a year. And when they called me not smart or articulate, and also said to make me the face of the whole unionizing efforts against Amazon, which I had no intentions, by the way, obviously that motivated me to continue to advocate for the workers that I was representing while I was still employed. So I traveled the country for about a year, protesting in front of Jeff Bezos' mansions and penthouses all across the country, until last year, April 2021, where the RWDSU had their first campaign. We traveled down to Alabama to pretty much just get a feel of what was going on the ground. And when we noticed that it was definitely a high, I guess you could say, high profile campaign. Everybody in the world was pretty much talking about that campaign. Politicians, celebrities, the news, the media. We wanted to see what the hype was about. You know, we didn't know. We knew what unions were. We had people researching, and we had our own members at the time putting together things that we can do as far as supporting the union, because we didn't know how to unionize. We had to research this. And when we went to Alabama, we saw some opportunities. We saw opportunities for them to improve, and we also saw opportunities for us to create. And when we came back to New York, that's exactly what we did. We said we got 2 options. We can either try to affiliate with an established union, or we can create our own union and put workers in the driver's seat, and that's exactly what we did. We founded the Amazon Labor Union on April 20th of 2021, and we just started campaigning, signing workers up, and Amazon didn't waste any time. Within our second week, they already flew up their $1 million union busters from Alabama to Staten Island. From that moment, we faced the onslaught of the union busters walking in the building 24/7, the captive audiences, which they held for several months every 20 minutes. So imagine going to work and being put into a captive audience, anti-union propaganda all day. They plastered the building, they plastered the break room, the bathrooms, the cafeteria, the shop floor with anti-union propaganda. They arrested myself and 2 other members, current workers at that, not just once, but twice. They used the NYPD several times. It wasn't the first time that we were accosted by the police. We actually were accosted over 8 times, maybe almost 10 times throughout the course of the campaign with the police. They used the landowners, the global matrix, to try to get us off the property. They built a barbed wire fence. They built a scaffold to discourage workers to talk to us. And they just continue to spread lies and rumors about what unions are. And we were still, throughout all of that, they spent $4.3 million with Global Strategy, a consulting firm, to try to stop us as well. And even with all of that, we were able to overcome the odds and successfully win our election by over 500 ballots, which now the company is disputing with over 25 objections. So just think about this in context, that the $1 trillion company that was successful for 28 years of anti-union campaigns now finally lost, and they're crying about the loss. They're actually objecting to the fact that they lost fair and square, and it's not even fair because we're not trillionaires, we're not billionaires, we're not millionaires, we're actually just workers. And what I mean by workers, we're actually the workers that generate the revenue for this company. So for us to say that this is a fair and square election is just, there is no way. We don't say that. We said that we defeated the odds. We were able to overcome the union busting, but the fight is not over. That's just one battle, and we're still not being recognized. So this just shed light on what's going on when it comes to the NLRB and the federal government. We're in a point in time where we all need to play a part in this campaign. It's not just the Amazon Labor Union, because if you think about it, if the Amazon Labor Union is unsuccessful in getting a contract, just think about the message that will resonate across the country, across the world right now, if we're not successful in getting a contract. They try to say that, if we were to lose, that we would be the ones damaging the labor movement. And that's just not correct. The thing is that everybody has to play a part. Even if you're not in the actual union, you're a consumer, you're a part of the community that we represent. We are majority Black and brown. This is a Black-led movement, I can tell you that. And just to give you some demographics, as you mentioned, in Alabama, that building alone, 85% Black and brown workers. 80% of the building is Black women. So when you think about that, 80% of the building is Black women, and they stopped that campaign. So think about the community that they're affecting, the women that they're affecting. Same thing in Staten Island. Demographics are a little bit different. It's 30 to 35% Black or brown. This still makes up the majority of the building. Definitely majority Black women. And the same thing, the community that we represent is Black and brown, and indigenous as well. And also immigrants. A lot of immigrants work at Amazon. And if we are not successful, this will affect a lot of people, tens of thousands, especially the fact that every building in the country has already reached out to us. They're watching us and they're rooting for us. So we're just asking, my job as interim president, we're asking for the support of everybody here. I'm asking for everybody's support to continue supporting the Amazon Labor Union, because we have an important court hearing that a lot of people are not mentioning right now, especially the media. On June 13th, we're going to court against Amazon in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, for recognition. So if you have some availability, or if you're in Phoenix, or if you know people in Phoenix, organizations, tell them that I'm actually traveling down there. We're actually going to bring workers from Staten Island, including myself, to Phoenix, Arizona, to that National Labor Relations Board, to that region, and we're going to advocate outside until we get what we rightfully deserve, and that is recognition of the Amazon Labor Union. And once that fight is over, once again, the fight just begun. We're going to have to fight for a contract, and I'm hoping that we will be successful. And I know we will. I know that I've seen the power of when people come together, especially in my last 2 years of being an organizer, jumping into the labor movement, standing on the picking lines with not just labor, but social injustice, environmental, women's rights, you name it, I'm there for you guys, and I'm asking for the same in return on behalf of the Amazon Labor Union. And I thank you all for having me.
Amazing, Chris. Well, June 13th in Phoenix, y'all. The workers from Staten Island will be in Phoenix. You heard it from Chris. Erica, I want to bring you into the conversation. You have been organizing also for many years, different worker sectors from retail and in the South. I know you've been organizing in the South for, beyond worker issues around electoral organizing. I read on the website of your current organization, Family Values at Work, there's a growing momentum as well across the country to support workers and families with workplace leave policies. And of course, we see the importance of this in the pandemic. I've also read that the vast majority of working people in the United States, something like 85%, do not have paid family leave from their employers, and that the consequences are especially severe for people of color, and due in part to the past and present institutionalized racism that's impacted our health and economic disparities. So can you talk more about the fight for workplace leave policies, why it's important and why it's a racial justice fight?
Absolutely. Thank you, Leah. And thank you, Chris and Dolores. We will absolutely win. And I say we in the Amazon fight because, like you mentioned, Chris, and folks are saying in the chat, it's going to take all of us to come together in our particular spaces to create the work life that we want, right? And that's included in these workplace policies that Family Values at Work in our 27 states focus on. We know that the pandemic has basically put this huge highlighter on what movement leaders already knew, and that legislators and employers highly ignored, which were essential workers, right? Like AKA the ones we pay the least, basically. Essential workers is nothing new. We know the importance of our frontline workers. We know the importance of our caregivers, the folks that are growing our food, stocking our shelves, the frontline people of public transportation. We know that they are key to our society, key to our communities thriving. We already knew that. They are mostly Black, Latinx, people of color, and very much disproportionately, they are women. The ugly truth of it is, we are the only country that doesn't guarantee paid sick and family leave for workers. So unfortunately, we have to rely on the Amazons, the Walmarts, the employers of the world to do the right thing. And they just are not doing it. Legislators or employers are not doing it. Paid and sick and family leave was almost a given for higher paid blue collar workers during the pandemic. These workers, they were predominantly white. They were able to stay at home and work from home during the pandemic. And they did it safely in their homes with their families, and didn't worry about the issues that essential workers worried about, and was not able to access these benefits. Among the lowest paid quarter of the workforce, the majority of whom are Black and Latinx, only half of them have paid sick days, and just 7% of them have paid family leave. Low-wage workers, far more likely to be people of color, they're regulated to these occupations due to historic discrimination. They're not accessing the same benefits as higher paying jobs, or same benefits as other industries. I think the most like relatable kind of like visual that we can see when we talk about like paid leave is with the mass shooting in Buffalo, right? Like those were grocery store workers. How many of them are able to take time off in this time to really grieve, mental health, have the space and time that they need to really bounce back from that? What type of support is coming from that employer to help facilitate that grief? Same with Valdovi in Texas, right? Like these are things that people need paid time off for, time to care for their families, make arrangements for things that they need. And we're finding, more often than not that these employers are not supplying this for their workers. I think about organizing last year when we were doing a lot of things around with the Amazon workers, and folks, it was coined as the Great Resignation for the country, right? And people leaving their jobs. It wasn't because people wanted to leave their jobs. It was literally the matter of, am I going to care for my child who now has COVID, or my mother who now has COVID, and I need to care for them and isolate myself, or am I going to go into work and still continue to work while I'm sick? That is what happened to our industry last year. That is why we have folks not able to work. That's why we have people not returning back to work, because enough is enough. You're now seeing people fully understand their value, their worth in the work economy, and that they're just not tolerating it any longer, right? These employers need to do better by their workers and offer paid sick days, paid time off, because it's essential to them thriving as a corporation, but also as their workers thriving. We can't continue to show up to work sick and jeopardize our families and jeopardize the other workers. So it's become, this kind of like uprising of workers that's really exciting, and really the pushback against employers of they're not tolerating it any longer. And I can just see it elevating up, higher and higher as we get more into the political realm of things, of these are policies that have to be passed on a national level that will help benefit all workers, not just low-wage workers, but benefit all workers.
Thank you, Erica. And Erica, could you give a little bit more information too about the broad coalition building that you've been doing, the different sectors, the different organizations and folks who are supporting the movement for workplace leave?
So as I mentioned, Family Values at Work has a network of over 27 states. In those states, we have nonprofits that's working on social justice, economic justice, reproductive justice issues. We have labor unions that we partner with, so that we're building that bridge between community organizing, labor organizing, and what it means to not only unionize, because you're right, we have to organize from within, but we have to go even deeper than that. We're organizing our communities, we're organizing within the labor movement as well, and then organizing these employers, and on the federal level, organizing around policies that benefit us as a whole. So the organizations that are a part of this coalition work together collectively on paid leave, paid sick days, as well as childcare, because we know that these are the things that our communities need for care, right? There's a care agenda that is like sweeping the nation, that is just not paid leave and paid sick days, but also childcare, the things that folks need to have a very productive work-life balance, right? Like that's crucial to our movement. And within these organizations, we help to, build power in their particular states locally with policies on a local level, and how to elevate that up to a federal level, and build programs that help build their community leaders in their states.
Beautiful. Thank you, Erica. This question is for Dolores and Chris. We are in a historical moment when we stand to lose many rights that our movements have gained in the civil rights era, from reproductive rights to voting rights. And we're also in the midst of some really vicious efforts to erase the history of racial justice movements in our schools. So I want to bring some attention to some of what stands to get erased in that history, which is the generations of sacrifice that organizers have made in order to change society and improve the lives of BIPOC workers and communities. So my question to you is, if you could share a story about a risk or a sacrifice that either you or one of your fellow organizers or workers made, and why you all continue to organize anyway. And Dolores, I know you experienced violence at the picket lines. You mentioned organizers getting killed, and Chris, you have been fired and arrested. And so, yeah, if you could just story share for a couple minutes about what it's like to take these risks and why.
Well, when you're out on the picket line, as Chris knows, you are, obviously you're a target for the type of violence that employers try to do to kind of put that fear into workers so that they won't continue their struggle, or when they kill people. Again, they want to put that fear. The one thing is, with the Farmworkers Union, we started right at the beginning the philosophy of nonviolence. And so our workers, they were prepared to know that whatever happened, we were not going to respond with violence, and we were going to continue organizing even after they killed some of our leaders, some of our farm worker leaders that we had in our movement. So we didn't let that stop us, but that was important to inculcate that at the very beginning, that we were not going to respond with violence, because then it would have been a carnage. So we did have I mentioned the 5 people that were killed in our struggle, but we continued to work through nonviolence and did not stop. I was also beaten by the police, actually in San Francisco, when we were challenging George Bush, George Walker Bush, the first Bush, because he said there was nothing wrong with pesticides. And that was one of the big issues that we had to fight in the farm worker movement, because so many farm worker children were being born with deformities and dying, and farm workers also dying from the misuse of pesticides. So that's one thing in all of our contracts that we signed. We made sure that the workers were safe when they used pesticides, that the workers could not be put back into a field until the pesticide had dissipated. And we were also able to get many of those pesticides banned so that they could not use them again. Unfortunately, they keep making new ones. And that's another issue that at some point that we have to challenge, along with the global warming that has also affected many farm workers, because if they don't have a union contract, they will make them work out there when it's really, really hot. And we have had farm workers that have died of heat exposure also. But the main thing is, we know that, but I just want to mention one thing too, that you did refer to, is that they're trying to erase the history of the union movement. And often when I speak to students, I'll ask them how many of them know how we got the 8-hour day. How many people know about May Day, which was a big major demonstration that happened in Chicago at the turn of the century. What happened to the leaders of the movement of the 8-hour day? They were executed, they were hung. And we don't have that in our histories. So I think one of the things that we have to continue to work for is to have labor history as part of the curriculums that we have in our schools, not only our racial history, which is of course important. I call it the Howard Zinn history of the United States of America, but people of color who built a country, like the African slaves and indigenous people that built the White House and the Congress. This needs to be included in our school books. And we know that the reason that they don't want our racial history included is because they are using the politics of hatred and of division and keeping our country ignorant. And I just want to share a quote with you that I just heard. And I'm not sure who the author was, but I think it was W. Du Bois, who said that America America could destroy ignorance, or ignorance will destroy America. And that is, I think, what we're seeing right now, that the ignorance that we have that has created so much hatred and division. And so at the same time that we're asking people to support labor unions, we've also got them to to join all of us, a race forward in all of our organizations to continue to eliminate the racism and the sexism and the homophobia that exists in our society, because otherwise we cannot go forward. Because all of those corporate interests that are trying to keep us divided, that's what they're using to keep us divided. And we cannot let that happen, but we're going to have to take the initiative. So, and I know it's a lot of work that we have to do, but at the same time, I know that everybody in our movement here, that this is our commitment, that we're going to erase the ignorance in our society so we can stop the fascism that is happening and the corporate greed that is happening in our society.
Thank you, Dolores. Chris, you want to jump in?
How do I follow up with that? You know, she's absolutely right. You know, I was arrested in our campaign, and I could just tell you, and I expected that. You know, we knew that we had to beat Amazon by doing things that were unprecedented. And we knew that we had to sacrifice. We had to show workers our militancy. We had to show them that we weren't afraid of the company. By me doing the walkout 2 years ago, that's exactly what I was trying to do. I knew that it was a risk. I didn't know that it would cost me my job. I knew that it was a possibility. But at the same time, once again, it was a life or death situation. So it was a no-brainer. And think about this, out of the 1.5 million workers that Amazon employs countrywide, nationwide, I was the only supervisor that spoke up about COVID-19 publicly. And I'm an hourly associate. So it didn't make any sense to me that even the ones that I work with every day, that also were agreeing to what was going on in the building. We all looked at each other. We said, you know, we're unprotected. Let's go to the office together. And when it came time to go into the office, I turned to my left, I turned to my right, and there's nobody there because they got afraid. They were afraid to speak up. They were afraid to lose their job. They were afraid to not have any income to feed their families. And I remember the one conversation before I walked in the main office the last time. I met up with a Black man, and I told him, I said, hey, brother, let's walk in this office together, and let's talk about what's going on to the management. And he looked at me and said, I can't. He said, I got kids. And that was his answer, and he walked away. And I thought to myself, I said, well, damn, I have kids too. I got twins, you know, I'm like, I got kids too, and I'm younger than him. So once again, the sacrifices are vital to these movements. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to be the sacrificial lamb, and I hate using that terminology, but that was me. Dolores, that was Caesar. We were the sacrificial lambs, so that the mass see the bigger picture. And sometimes in these movements, that's what it takes. Unfortunately, sometimes that comes with death. Sometimes that comes with prison. Sometimes that comes with, you know, getting beat, being made example of, smear campaigns. It comes with all of that. And that's what I signed up for. When people ask me, you know, why do you do this? Why do you do that? How do you do this? How do you do that? I just say it comes with the territory. Me being the public figure, being out in the open, advocating for what I'm advocating against, going up against billionaires and trillionaire corporations. We expect, we as organizers, and activists, we have to expect every action to have a reaction. So the sacrifice is always necessary. And when I think about organizing, you have to be strategic with it. You have to know what time and when to do things. And, you have to know, you have to try to be 2 steps ahead of your opponent. And that's the one thing I learned within my short 2 years. Dolores, your resume is a lot longer, but just knowing that me being arrested outside of the Amazon building, I knew that it would backfire. I don't think Amazon did, and I'm kind of surprised that they wouldn't. When I told them, I said, if you arrest me, you know it's going to be on the front page tomorrow. And they did it anyway. They did it anyway because to them, they don't care. They'll do whatever it takes to stop the movement, to intimidate workers. But to us, that was a gem for us. By them arresting me, it upsetted so many people, even people that wasn't people of color, because it's just the principle of them, this corporation using all this money and power to try to stop workers that was just trying to feed their coworkers. And that's what it takes. It takes sacrifice at the right time. It takes sacrifice in all these movements in order for the mass to get aware of the bigger picture. And we have to continue doing it, unfortunately. And I know that, once again, this is the beginning stages of our battle. But I can tell you here, I'm willing to do that. I know Dolores mentioned, we all collectively have to do that. And that's something that we have to commit to. I tell my organizers every day, when you go to work, you have a target on your back. You have to tread lightly with the company, but just know that you have the support of the community. So whatever happens to you, we're going to take care of it. And as long as they believe in that, that's how we're going to continue to press forward, is believing in one another, taking care of one another. The community that we are representing, once again, they have our backs, and that's how it's it's more of us than it is of them. We have to show our strength in numbers at any given moment, and we're willing to do so.
Incredibly inspiring. Thank you. Thank you both. And I just want to remind the audience to add your questions to the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen there. We will compile the questions and take the last few minutes of our time together. I do want to talk about gender and organizing, and Erica, I think we probably have time for you to highlight this issue before we get into some of the audience Q&A. Erica, can you talk about the connection between paid family leave and reproductive freedom? And we know what's at stake with Roe v. Wade. I don't know that the connection is always made between workplace issues and reproductive freedom. But if you could talk a little bit about that. And I'm actually going to ask you 2 questions and see if I don't know if you can answer them in 5 minutes. But I would also love for you to touch on how the fight for workplace leave is also a queer and trans issue, because I know people who are in family formations that are different from the so-called nuclear family are also can be excluded from that, and so I would love for you to shine some light on that.
Absolutely. So we do have organizations that are a part of our network that focuses solely on reproductive justice rights and the fight against women and their body autonomy, right? We know that it's been, with the leak of Roe versus Wade, like there's been an uproar just recently around just how we have no control over, women have no control over the rights for their bodies and the decisions that they're making, right? It's an organizing tool to help build up better policies, right? Like we have to start making policies that are effective for everyone, that help support everyone in their growth and just being a human being. And I think about just the work that we do around family definitions that talks specifically about what it means to have paid leave for a loved one, right? In the traditional way of thinking, people, automatically, wife, husband, 1.2 child. I don't know how they got the 1.2 number, but whatever, the 1.2 child, a child and a dog, I guess. But we know that that's not how families are looking today. Like there are multiple ways and multiple variations of how we identify who our family is and who it is that we need to love and care for. So as we write these policies and push these particular policies for paid leave, we're being very intentional to include Xfinity or, very loose language around the definition of who is your family, and actually writing it into these policies to assure that, same-sex partners can care for their loved one if they need to take care of them. A lot of times, some of these policies do not extend to an aunt or an uncle, but there are variations of families that's what's covered. You're raised by whomever you're raised by and the family that you choose to live with. So Family Values at Work and their network partners have a huge just like commitment to being very inclusive in our language and our definitions when we go to write policies.
Beautiful. Thank you, Erica. So with that, I want to open up for questions from the audience. I'm just going to take a look here. If you have not yet put your question in the Q&A, please do so. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a Q&A button. You can drop your questions in there and our staff are collecting those questions. We do have one question about the current election cycle. And I'm curious, what are some of your thoughts about the current labor policies? I know, Erica, you've been talking about some specific policy, but just a quick round with the speakers. Can you talk about some of the current labor policies in this election cycle that would be important for people to think about when considering different candidates?
So I'm not very familiar with the actual labor specific policies that's happening right now in the elections. The only thing I could tell you, being from Georgia, is learn the ballot, right? Like, print out your ballot, and now's the time to ask those questions of the candidates to get a better understanding of who's the right person, to vote for, who is supporting what issues. If there is a specific labor related issue, I encourage you to go to your to the state AFL-CIO or the labor council that's in your local to find out, what's the best path for that particular labor issue.
Thank you. Dolores, Chris?
Yeah, I would just like to say that, some of the benefits that we won for farm workers, and that was by getting people elected that would support us, like Governor Jerry Brown, some of the people in the state legislature. So we were finally able to get unemployment insurance for farm workers, so that, because farm workers throughout, in all of the states, there's only 3 states, I think, where farm workers have full unemployment insurance. Now, I know Amazon workers have them because it's unemployment insurance that was given to all the workers under the Fair Labor Standards Act, but the farm workers were excluded. So all these other states like Arizona, all of the states in the South, Texas, farm workers don't have unemployment insurance. They don't even have a good workers' comp bill if they get hurt on the job. Like we have in California, we have disability insurance for farm workers, so if they get sick off the job that they're covered. But farm workers throughout the country don't have these benefits. So I just want to ask you to keep that in mind. And as you know, in the South, they have these right to work laws, like in Georgia and Texas and many of the states, where it makes it more difficult for farm workers to, or not only farm workers, but other workers to form a union. And so we've got to get rid of those right to work laws, which make it impossible for unions to survive because like I mentioned before, the employers have their organizations that they pay dues to, but under the right to work laws, the workers cannot pay dues to a union, but what they call a checkoff off of their wages. So it makes it a lot harder for labor unions to have the financial resources that they need. So just keep that in mind. And elections are really important. And when we talk about what we want in our curriculums in the schools, the people that we elect to school boards are important, and to be the education superintendents of education in our states are very important, because I think that's one of our struggles is we have to make sure that we get labor's history, women's history, our ethnic histories to be part of the curriculum. In California now, it's going to be mandatory. Every child before they graduate from high school has to take ethnic studies, but high school is too late. We've got to get it down in the kindergarten level, right? So that we can erase the sexism and teach everyone. By the way, I do have to say this, because I hope all of you will repeat this, just to remind people that we are one human race, Homo sapiens, and our human race began in Africa. And we have to repeat that so people will understand that, to make people understand that we are all descendants of Africans, okay? We are all Africans. And so we can say to all of those white supremacists out there, get over it, okay? Because you're Africans, all right? Enough already, you know? So, you know, but I think we've got to get this really, you know, and also a worker's right to form a union. We've got that into our curriculum. So elections matter, and we've got to really put that on the top of our agenda, that we get everybody that we know to get them out there to vote, and to vote for progressive candidates. Because if not, things are not going to get better. They're going to get worse for all of us. So now is the time that we've got to make sure that we get people that support unions, support women's reproductive rights, support immigrant rights, okay? That we get those people elected.
Thank you. Chris, do you want to chime in on this question?
Yeah, sure. You know, Erica and Dolores are absolutely right. You know, it starts with our education, and it starts with our grassroots movements as well. We have to make sure that they do reach out. I know I've been doing the best I can, visiting schools and colleges. I just actually just visited a middle school, and I was so surprised when I walked in a room and the kids we were talking about 6th and 7th graders were, I'm sorry, y'all have me now?
Just lost Chris. We can come back to that question. I have another question here. Since Dolores mentioned the power of boycotts, and you know, we can ask Chris when Chris comes back on. But Erica, you know, you come from also a retail worker organizing background. I'm curious what you think about what consumers and the public can do to pressure companies like Amazon and Walmart. You know, do you think that, you know, not buying from Walmart is an effective strategy?
So definitely we see Dolores and thumbs up absolutely is an effective strategy, right? Because it's hitting them where their pockets are. But I definitely want us to start being more strategic, even with boycotts, right? Because while it's hitting the corporation where their pockets are, when we don't shop, then our community is not working, right? We know with Amazon, they have rate TLT, like they literally build your schedule around the amount of product that's coming in. And similar to Walmart, like there's some internal organizing strategies that have to happen when we talk about boycotting, because we don't want to hurt the workers. That's not our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is to get the employers to respect the workers and to respect the fact that we are the ones that's making them these billions of dollars, right? So yes, and we should also really, really dig into the education piece and debunking that myth of accountability to the employers for if we have a right to unionize, we have a right to organize. That is law, right? So we need to start holding those folks accountable for that. I come from labor organizing, so I'm always, you know, yes, we should unionize. Let's prioritize that. But I'm a big firm believer that our community needs to be educated on what that actually means. It's not just about paying union dues, right? Like that's a process, that's a part of it, but that's not what it's for. Like it is that representation, it is that stability that those companies that have unions, they have much more stability than they do the corporations that do not provide a union.
Thank you. Welcome back, Chris.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
New place, new connections. So yeah, what I was saying is I've been doing my due diligence, try to visit a lot of schools and not just colleges. As Dolores mentioned, that's too late, but it's never too late. But what I have been doing is making a priority to visit a lot of the middle schools and elementary schools. And I was surprised walking into classrooms with 6th and 7th graders, and they're mentioning that Jeff Bezos is a bad person. And I haven't even gave my speech yet. I haven't even introduced myself yet. So to see that in the classroom at a young age, talking about labor, talking about unions, talking about the real history of where labor came from in these classrooms at a younger age. I know I didn't have that opportunity 10 years ago when I was in school. So that's what it's also about. We have to push these established unions. It can't just be the ALUs here with the new kids on the block and now we're doing all this work and everybody has to catch up. It shouldn't be that way. It should just be that, we done something historical. We definitely broke some barriers, but now it's time for everybody to step up. Just how you've seen me hold elected officials accountable. Accountability goes on both sides as well. I'm definitely holding everybody that I work with accountable, just as I expect them to hold me accountable as well. When it comes to politicians, yes, they showed up. They show up when they want to. They show up for their agenda. But remember, we put them there. And if we don't get what we want from them, we need to let that be known. Just how some people may have seen, I had to call out AOC just to get her to come to Staten Island, and I'll do it 1,000 times over. That's what it's about. It's about us at the bottom, the workers, making sure that whoever we put in office, they are there for our agenda, not just theirs. And the same thing when it comes to these established unions. I've met a lot of union presidents in the last 2 months. And guess what? I tell them the same thing. If you want to help support us, you have to support us. You have to really, really support us. You can't just talk about it to the media, say you're going to help. You can't just scream out the word solidarity because that doesn't mean anything. That's what it has. It has to be real action. It has to be real collective action taking place. And we have to push each other. We have to push each other to hold each other accountable. And it starts with ourselves. The best accountability is availability. Mm-hmm. So being there for one another and showing up when the time is needed.
Thank you.
And I also think that educating the public, okay, I mentioned the 8-hour day that labor leaders died for so that everybody could have an 8-hour day. But everything else that we have, unemployment insurance, Social Security, weekends, workers' compensation. So when workers are hurt on the job, they can be taken care of course, except the farm workers, which a lot of them, as I mentioned, still don't have that. Public education. These are all of the things that were fought for by labor. Labor unions brought us all of these things that we take for granted. And I hope that all of us with our organizations ask them to educate their members also, that these are the things that we enjoy today, vacations, paid leave, all of these things, labor unions, even the Affordable Care Act that we have in many states, like here in California, that people are able to have. It's always been labor unions that have been at the forefront of fighting for workers. But we sometimes our own members don't know that. So that we have to educate them and then ask them also to repeat that and to spread that out to everybody that they know, put it on their websites. Oh, by the way, if you haven't seen the film Dolores, it's named after me, but it talks about my work with the Farmworkers Union. And there's a lot of really good information out there, and talk about the stories of the farm workers that were beaten up and all of us that went to jail many times. I think my rap sheet is bigger than yours, Eric. You got to catch up with me. But, so you can find that on YouTube or on PBS. The film is the name is Dolores, and I recommend to everybody that they see that because it shows worker power and how we had President Nixon, Ronald Reagan, all of the agricultural industry, the Farm Bureau Federation, the Bank of America, all of these powerful organizations that were against the farm workers, but we won because we had the people behind us. And that's what we know, that we've got the power, but we have to use that power by organizing.
Just let me borrow your 17 million.
Yeah, that's what we have to do. But the way we did that, is that we had the farm workers go out. They left the little towns in the valleys of California, and they went to New York. We went to New York City. We had a whole group of farm workers with this in New York, and then from there they went to Michigan, they went to Florida, they went to Ohio, they went to Texas. So we had farm workers all over the United States. Some of them went to Canada, some of them went to England, and asking people to boycott grapes. Now, I don't know if we can boycott Amazon because they may go after us if we do, but what we can do an informational, let people know. So it's not like a real boycott in a way, but we can say to people, do you know this is what Amazon is doing to their workers? Do you want to think about, continuing to support Amazon? All of us are with the Amazon workers, but we've got to get it out to the American public and maybe ask them. And Walmart, I say, friends don't let their friends shop at Walmart. And sometimes the workers may have to sacrifice so that they can get a union that will give them pensions when they get through with their work, that they can have a pension, and they can have a good medical plan, and they can have, take family leave when they need to. These are the benefits that they get. And of course, having that political influence. This is why we need to really make sure that workers have unions.
Thank you. Amazing discussion. We are at time. I wanted to give each speaker just 15 seconds. Though I know that where people will be logging off, but we do want folks to be able to plug into your campaign. So if there's one thing that you'd like folks to come away with, please do a quick round and a few seconds here to close out. And we'll start with you, Erica.
Thank you all. This has been an amazing, amazing conversation. Look forward to many more. You can follow me at all platforms on Family Values at Work. Sign up for our newsletter, familyvaluesatwork.org, and that's AT at work. And keep on fighting the good fight. This is a collective liberation, so it's going to take all of us to come together and really, really jump in.
Dolores.
Well, I just want to quote Robert Kennedy Jr., who said that when workers control the government, we have socialism. When corporations control our government, we have fascism. And it's going to take all of us working together to stop the fascism in our country. And when anybody is against labor unions and workers, they are, and we can call them fascists because that's exactly what they are. And to learn more about the Dolores Huerta Foundation, because we continue doing our grassroots organizing to encourage people to join labor unions. We're doing a lot of education work. We're like in 17 different school districts, covering over 200 schools to end the racism in our school systems also, which we know is very prevalent. Please go to doloreshuerta.org, okay? doloreshuerta.org, and you can learn more about our work that we're doing with the foundation.
Thank you so much, Dolores. Chris?
Yes, please support us on all platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, at Amazon Labor Union. Myself at @shut_down Amazon on Twitter. No surprise there. I'm gonna end off by pretty much touching on what we started this whole discussion, the tragedies that we witnessed and seen over the last couple of weeks. Just imagine if we all stop going to work. You know how much power we can accumulate just by not going to work. When the middle of the pandemic, when everything was shut down, the world was on pause, and we joined in these movements: Black Lives Matter, social injustice, environmental, labor, women's rights, etc. Just imagine after these children have passed, and we all said the next day that we're not going to work until there's some real gun reform. That's the power of the people. And I just want to leave it there. You know, we have to hold our labor until we get better. And that's exactly what we need to do and push forward. So thank you all.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, 100%. People power, worker power. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to the panelists, to all of our audience for tuning in. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care, everyone.